So hi everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. My name is LaDaisy Turner. I am um, a naturopathic, global health, midwifery student at National University of Natural Medicine. And I collaborated with Juani this past summer, working on the EmpowerME program and implementing it in the Siaya County in the Kuala Saga region of Kenya. So I will share my screen to begin. Give me 1 second. So this is the presentation, so I'll just begin. So as I said before, this is just an introduction period of the program, the EmpowerMe program, that is a Juani program. And it highlighted a menstrual hygiene focus for girls within the Siaya County, and also implementing menstrual hygiene kits distribution to about 6 schools within the region. So I'll begin. Okay. So background a little bit. So in Siaya County, it faces significant economic, educational, health, and cultural and infrastructural challenges. There's high poverty rates and low income within families there, and this basically limits the opportunities and job opportunities families can get, and then reduces their likelihood of affording the necessity of sanitary products for young girls within the region. There's also high dropout rates for the girls due to this issue of not being able to have menstrual hygiene products or access to enough to continue their attendance at school during their menses, as well as managing just having overall strain on the education system on educating the girls about their menses and how to go about healthily dealing with their menses on a monthly basis. And then there's resources, healthcare system with inadequate facilities and resources to help the girls within this issue. And then there's lastly cultural stigmas around the menstruation and underdevelopment infrastructure that further exacerbate these issues that leave women and girls vulnerable to health risks and the limited life opportunities because of this. So with that, the Juani then tried to fit the need by trying to implement the EmpowerMe program. And I forgot to mention, so the EmpowerMe program, it stands for, so empower the girls, but M stands for menstrual, and E, education. So it was like a collaborative effort at the beginning, right before we launched officially the program, coming up with the name, and that's why it's called EmpowerMe. So for the goals and objectives for this program, Juani, we wanted to conduct menstrual education sessions at 6 local schools within the Siaya County to both male and female students, then distribute approximately 50 menstrual hygiene kits. We call them moon catchers, specifically this type of kit, to girls in 1 grade at Luero Primary School. Then gather the baseline data on menstrual hygiene and feedback on education from female students at these schools that we visited, so we can know how to implement future interventions, and then increase school attendance rate for the girls who receive the kits, and then empower adolescents and teachers on menstrual hygiene education and reduce social stigma within the community. So the list of schools that we covered were at first Luero, which is the pilot school where we distributed the kits, and then the other 5, St. Joseph Ochel, Lafunga, Duraho, St. Joseph Oyundo, and then lastly the largest school, which is in Sega Township. So the methods and how did we collect our data? So most of the data was collected via surveys. Unfortunately, we weren't able to conduct any group discussions, small group discussions, or one-on-one interviews with the girls, unfortunately. So surveys was how we were able to get the data in mass quickly and efficiently. So we did pre and post education interventions that included quizzes, both before the education piece, which is pre, and then after the education, we used the same questions, and it was 10 multiple choice questions that were specifically queued for both boys and girls that covered all of the information that we were going to be covering that day. Then baseline surveys that we gave to specifically Luero girls that got the kits on finding out where they were at in their menses, and then also following up with them after they had received the kits about a month later. And that leads to the 1 month follow-up survey that we did. And that kind of trickled in to also when Sarah and John went ahead to Kenya in October after I had left. So just a little brief overview of who were the educators. So this is actually the day we implemented the program for the first time at Luero. As you can see, it's a couple of us. So we have Lennox, and then myself, Kezi, Doreen, Millicent, Jared, and then Millicent at the end. So going from left to right. And then who's not in the picture, who also is a part of the team, is Etta, or she helped with and assisted with the later down the line with the last few schools that we implemented the program in, but she's not in the picture. So how did the program look? So first of all, we had to introduce ourselves. This is kind of a little quick rundown of what the program would look like when we go into the schools. So we introduce ourselves and who we are to the program and a little bit of our background. And then we go ahead and we split the students up. We gave them each a number, which made it quicker instead of them going into their own specific friend groups. We wanted to make sure and utilize and evenly and unbiasedly these groups so these students can work together. So we gave them all a number, different numbers, 1 to 5, and then had them in groups of 5 or 6, both boys and girls separate, and gave them a laminated copy of the questions, the 10 questions, and we gave them about 10 minutes, close to 7 to 10 minutes to work through those questions on their own as a group. And then we would collect that information right after that, and then begin the education portion. So, and then someone on the side would grade the questions, and then we would begin the education portion. So the education piece consisted of just talking about what is puberty and what are the physical and emotional changes that both girls and boys, and the differences that happen during puberty for what that looks like for girls and boys. Then what is the menstrual cycle, and going over that, and then the sex education portion, understanding what is sex, then what is consent to sex, and what that looks like. Then what is pregnancy as a result of sex, and not teenage pregnancy, and the consequences of being pregnant too early in life. And then sexually transmitted illnesses that can be transmitted due to sexual activity, and what that looks like. And I must admit, I tried my best to not scare the children when it comes to pictures, because obviously pictures speak 1,000 words when it comes to that topic. And then after the education portion, we then go back and have the students go back into their same groups and do the questions, the 10 quiz questions again. And then once that happens, we would split the boys, and I think Lennox would take the boys, and then me or another and the other female educators would sit down with the girls and just have a brief discussion on what is menstrual hygiene look like for them, and ways that they can work through during the difficult time of menses with menstrual cramps, and how to keep their bodies healthy, how to keep their bodies safe during a menses, and then what are the different types of menstrual products that they may have available or that are just generally available, and then also discussing deeply what is hormone catchers and how to use them. And then we would go ahead and have them do that quiz again, I think, after that. Sometimes you have them do it before. And then lastly, once all of the questions have been done by the groups, we establish who is the winner for the boys and who's the winner for the girls in terms of the groups. And then we would distribute prizes like sweets. And for the girls, we would also give them, we had a few lovely menstrual bracelets that helps the girls to track their menses. That was made by some of the Juani team, Sarah and a few other members. And we distributed those as some of the prizes we give to the students and the winning group. And this whole program basically lasted about an hour. That's usually what most of the schools would give us. We did not want to interfere too heavily into the school day for the students and deter, the regular curriculum and leave the students and take too long, basically, and take away from them being able to go on with their day. So this is just a quick, I'll just move this so you guys can see. Just a quick pictures of what were some of the pamphlets that we distributed to the students when we came in and educated. So these are what we had given the students during our education piece that pretty much covered all of the same information that was in the education portion, but we also had laminated copies of the same information that we would give to the teaching staff for them to keep, so that once we leave, they can still reiterate the information and have some sort of resource to fall back on after our education piece had happened. So this is what the girls' pamphlet looks like, just specifically talking about what menstrual cycle was. And then also over here, as you can see, this is basically just kind of a helpful guide on also how girls can understand their menstrual bracelets, and then also with the moon catchers and a little information on that, and then how to work through the emotional and physical changes during their menses. And then this is the copy of the pamphlet for the boys. And this goes into just little details on puberty, and also what is a period and menstrual cycle. But then also it has a cute little, at the end, questions to test their knowledge at the end. So I thought that was nice. I think Sarah added that lovely part to the pamphlets to make it nice and interactive. So that also was another copy that was left with the teaching staff for reuse after we're gone. So this is pictures of what the moon catcher kits look like. So this was actually a lovely picture that was made by Millicent, which I shout out to Millicent for making this lovely pictures that we have. So on the left, as you can see here, this is basically all of the items that we had given to the students, particularly at Luero. The pamphlets, the mooncatcher kits, and then the pencils and menstrual bracelets. And then inside these lovely bags, there were the mooncatcher kits itself, and this is basically a breakdown of what that looks like. Over here, you see this is basically just the cloth that they would, a reusable cloth that basically they would put inside the mooncatcher itself and strap that around their waist. And then when they need to wash it, that's what they would put this used cloth in and wash it and then hang it out to dry. And then the nice little card that has each month that they can write down when their menses was so they can track it. So what were the questions that we gave these students? Pretty much it covered, like I said, the topics that we were going to be talking about in the education. So what is puberty? What does that look like for the physical and emotional changes? What is the menstrual cycle? And then it split off a little bit for the boys specifically and for the girls, talking for the girls about how long can you bleed during your menses, but then what are the different types of menstrual hygiene products they can use. And then basically we still covered sex and the consent to sex, what is pregnancy, talking about STIs and asking them to name a few of the STIs that they know, and then going back to how we can reduce the transmission of an STI and produce pregnancy. So for these questions were specifically for Luero, the baseline menstrual hygiene questions that we focused on, and just covering just getting a track of the name so we can follow back up with these students. So their name, their age, whether they've had their menses or not, and if they have access to menstrual products, do they miss school, finding out what education, did they like the education piece that we had offered them, and also a nice little end, what do they want to be when they grow up? I just thought that was I was curious. I wanted to find out what the girls were. And there were some interesting answers, but yes, this is what those questions covered. And so I added in a few pictures here on our time at these different schools. So these are pictures at Luero, and I had my iPad, which helped keep kids engaged, which is nice, covering the PowerPoint that I had for the education piece. So that's me showing that to the students, and then the girls at the end who got their kits, and the pictures with the team. And also pictures from Ochel, and I'll just move this over as well. And then Lafunga and Darajo, that should say Lafunga, not living, sorry. So Lafunga is the ones with the light blue. And this actually, I will say, this was the largest school outside of Sega that we had, because they added in the the fifth grade students as well. So we basically, there was no classroom that could hold us. So we had to stay outside and educate the students. So that was pictures of us there. And Darajo was actually the smallest school we went to. So it was very, very, everyone fit in one room. So it was fine. And then of course Oyundo, and we I think this is a combination actually. We had this that left picture may not be Oyundo, but the right is, and pictures of the students there. And then the last thing about the follow-up questions that we had, these questions I did not personally, I think, implement. I think it was Sarah and John, when they went in October, had asked and went back to Laura and asked the girls that received the Mooncatcher kits these questions. So how have you used your kits? What period products did you use during your last period? Do you like using the Mooncatcher? And have you missed school because of your bleeding, and are you able to keep clean and keep your Mooncatcher clean, and having it hang out on the sun to dry? So basically the meat of what all of this was for. So what does the data tell us that we got? So I just pretty much summarized first, like what schools we went to, when did we go, and what did it look like? What were the students that we saw, and broken that down. So basically, for Luero, we did track the amount of girls, obviously, because we had to count the amount of kits we distributed. But then for the boys, unfortunately, we were very new to our data gathering, and we were unable to track how many boys we had actually educated that day. So I approximated to about 100 students in total that we educated in Luero that day. But then we got better, and we were able to track the boys further on for the other 5 schools. So for Ochel, we were able to see about 91 students, Lafunga 119. As I said, that was the largest group because they added in that 5th grade. And then Darajo, about 28, the smallest. St. Joseph Oyundo, 74, and then Sega, the largest out of all the schools. We left for the last, and unfortunately, because it was so large and because it was our last school we saw, we didn't have the resources to track physically how many students we had actually interacted with that day. And actually, we had initially started out separate. So I basically had just provided the education solely to the girls, and then Lennox had just provided the education solely to the boys separately, because we did not have time to have them in groups and separate, because it was just too large of a population of students. So I approximate about 300 girls we talked to that day, and maybe 200 to 300 boys on average, in total maybe 500 to 600 students. So overall, close to 1,000 guys, 1,000 students we had actually educated over about 2.5-week period. So looking at the data, this is the baseline data that we got from Luero. So this is not any of the other schools' data information. So how old were the students? About 13 or 14, most of them at the time were 13 years old, who we had educated. As you can see, there were 1 or 2, there's 11-year-old and even as high as 16, but mainly 13 to 14-year-old girls. And then, sorry, I'm gonna keep moving this around. But for the questions that we specifically asked in the baseline data, has your period started yet? As you can see, about 90% of these girls said no. I have my theories on it, but obviously there's nothing concrete. But yes, they had answered us no. Only about 10% that said they had started their periods. And then for those who did say they had their periods, half of them using the disposable pads. And I think so when we implemented these questions, this was after the distribution of the Mooncatcher kits. So there may have been some confusion on how to answer this question. So that's what I'm gonna chop the 40% of girls that said that they're using reusable pads. I could be wrong, but that's my theory there. And so they probably were answering the use of the moon catchers, since seeing as these questions were given after we had distributed the kits. So yeah, 40% said menstrual reusable pads, 40% disposable, and then 20% other. Then for the access, most of these girls, 79.6% had said they do have access to the menstrual products, menstrual hygiene products. And then missing school, most of these girls have said no, they don't miss school because of their period. So there you have it there. And then lastly, for this part, sorry, the information's so tiny, but do you think if you had access to more or better menstrual products, you would be able to attend school regularly? And most of these girls said yes, 93.9% of them did. And then did you like the menstrual education? Well, 100% of them said yes. So that's lovely on our end. We very grateful to know that we were very well received. So going on to that 1 month follow-up data, so the number of girls that received the kits was about 49 at Luero. And out of that, the number of girls using the kits was about 12. And this is follow-up. I think this was when Sarah and John had visited. And so the types of menstrual hygiene products that they were using, out of these 12 girls, were disposable pads still, and also the moon catchers, but most of them were using the disposable pads, which was interesting. And then the number of girls that liked using the Mooncatcher kits were all of them. So there's some interesting discrepancy with the data, because if most of them were using disposable pads, then I wasn't sure on like how to fully gather that on whether they liked the Mooncatchers. Maybe they tried it and they liked it, but they didn't want to say they didn't like it. I don't know. So there's that. And then there's the missed school, those who had missed school. 5 of the girls who had the kids said they missed school because of their menses. So going on to student feedback. So what did they like about the program? So I asked them specifically about that. And some of the answers here are the information. I basically gave them a few answer choices, and a lot of them did just kind of, I felt like they were copying the next person's answers and saying just information. So a lot of them said the information is what they liked. Some said receiving the pads, others learning about the menstrual cycle and how to prevent the STIs, learning how to protect themselves when on their period, and then learning about cleanliness, and my ultimate favorite, receiving the sweets. So that was a nice little end to answers. And then at the questions of the 1 month follow-up, basically these girls were asked, do you have any more questions about anything in regards to mooncatchers, your menses? And some of the questions were, how do you use the mooncatcher kit? So there's some, it makes me feel a little like, okay, maybe we need to reiterate the program and emphasize continuously on how to educate the girls on mooncatcher kits. And this could be coming from girls. No, actually, all of these questions, I believe, came from girls who are actively, like, have had menarche and have had their period. But I'm not 100% on that. So there's that question. Then what can you do if you're feeling pain during your period? Can someone miss a period? This was covered in the educational piece of the education that we provided. But, these are young kids, they forget things, so I get it. And again, can the Mooncatcher kit be used more than 1 year? That was a good one. And yeah, the answer I believe is yes. They can be used up to 7 years, I believe. And then how can Juani help a child who is not going to school? So that's more broad, not specific in any ways, most likely to the menses, but not specific to the reason why the child would be not going to school. So there was that question. So summarizing and condensing it all down, the information. So the average age of girls that we educated in the program was 13. And the average age of girls that we educated in the program who had reached menarche and had to begin their period was 14. So the percentage of girls who reached their menarche was 48.3, but then you look at the percentage of girls with no menarche, it was 56.6. So clearly there was more girls who had received education who's not started their period yet. So that was, I mean, it's still good. They should all get the information, but it's more useful when you're actively having the issues um, uh, for the information to sink in a little bit more deeper. So then of the average age of girls who received kits were 13 years old, the same who have been overall educated. And then the number of girls who received kits was 53. That includes all of the schools. And then the number of girls who reached menarche with kits were 16 girls, or 30%. And then the number of girls with no menarche with the kits were 38 girls, which is 70%. So as you can see, the ones who received the education, the ones who received the kits, most of them had not reached menarche yet. So that's something on our end. Maybe we can find out more a little bit before a little bit more information on the girls and whether they have reached menarche, and who would be able to use the kits and like actively right away versus those who have yet to reach menarche, and there may be some more time. And so the education piece, I think, gets lost a little because you would have to wait time from when they actually receive the kits and receive the education to when they actually need it, and so that can be it's an unknown amount of time. So there's that. So just looking hindsight. And then going on, so overall, with the introduction of the EmpowerME program and outreach, education was provided to over 700 girls. I said close to about 1,000 kids at 6 schools within the Siaya County area. 53 Mooncatcher kits were distributed to girls. 2 sets of education materials were given to teaching staff at 6 schools to reuse and educate on menstrual hygiene and puberty. And then in regards to the education and the scores, so the average pre-quiz score was 4.5 out of 10. And then the average post score was 6 out of 10. So there was improvement once we've educated the students. And I must say that I'll add in that most of the improvement came, and also the highest scores came from the girls. And it makes sense, right? Because most of this is covering more female related issues. So their ears are going to be peaked to the information more than the boys. But overall, there was improvement from all of the groups, both boys and girls. So what are our challenges that we had when we implemented this program? Some of it was limited education time. So we only got an hour. Pretty much all of the schools only gave us about an hour of time to go through this. So I had to really rush through a lot. I felt like it could have been slower. So there's that. But we did not want to interfere with the curriculum, so we took what we could get. Then there's large class sizes. Like I said, that biggest one up until Sega was the Lafunga class, which is like unexpected because the headmaster basically just said, "Oh, it was that in the 5th grade. It's fine. They should get this education too." So with that unexpected larger number came, it was hard to kind of reach. The sound was harder because we're outside. It was windy, so that larger size does create some issues that with education, making sure that all the students are getting meaningful education out of it. And so we were not able to do any small group discussions as well because of that. Then there was multiple schools of focus simultaneously. So we did go to 6 schools in about a 2.5-week period. So it felt a little bit rushed in that way, that we had to go through all the schools, 2 of which we saw in one day at one point. So there's that challenge. And then there's limited interactive materials for students. We only had pamphlets pretty much. And then my iPad of just, having the kids look and point. So there's that. And then requests of donations and money from the school staff in exchange for program education that came up, which is a little bit surprised. Not really, but at the same time it was. They kind of were, some of the staff kind of was grateful, but then others would say, "Oh, is that all you have for us?" So I was a little taken back with that, but I get it. It makes sense. There's also a lot of NGOs that come into these schools that provide these disposable menstrual pads to the school. So there was a preface made by a lot of the head masters at the school that said if we were going to provide the students with this education and provide menstrual kits, they would rather it be reusable kits and not disposable ones because they have enough of that. And that makes sense. So there's that. And then inconsistencies with menarche data and student reporting. So I have my theories on some of these girls were shy and they were not able to probably truthfully tell us whether they had reached menarche, because I get it, we're all strangers to them. and you were foreigners, me included. And so I wouldn't be comfortable, especially at that very, interesting age of teenagers. You don't you care a lot about what your peers think of you, and so if you're going to talk about menses and stuff, especially when when it's not in a small group setting, it's not with people they regularly know and talk to about it, and it's also a cultural stigma to openly talk about this. So there's a lot of shame probably attached to it too. So I got divulging this personal information publicly and amongst their peers can give a lot of students in this age some, they feel comfortable. So that was a challenge. So what are my recommendations going forward? So targeting ages 13 to 16, or higher grades to guarantee menarche has been reached as one, seeing as most of these girls weren't getting their periods until probably about 14 or so. And then focusing on one target school at a time with data collection about quarterly, so every 3 months or so. Having a locked suggestion or data collection box at schools to report menarche or menstrual health needs anonymously. So we can probably try to break from that possibly embarrassing moment of asking the girls openly about their menarche, and they can kind of anonymously tell us through this locked box. Then expanding educational tools such as games, posters, and cost incentives for the schools to make use of these tools, such as like writing utensils and chalk, pens, pencils and markers, notebooks, rulers, and even reusable water bottles. And then training older girls. I thought this came to me like literally this morning about training older girls or peer educators to run a small group discussion about menstruation and menarche. Seeing as I think I just falling back to how old when I was that age, and being more receptive talking to girls my age versus talking to an adult. And so I feel like these girls probably may be open up more to girls their age because they see, these are my peers and it's just me chatting with my friends kind of thing, which might give us more leeway in getting more accurate data. And then competition among schools educated. So we would have had education with them with these schools, and then having them compete on who is doing the best with their, mooncatcher kits, or the amount of information they know about menstrual hygiene, making it like giving them awards or certificates, and then bragging rights to continue the education. So some type of incentive that way. And then collaborating possibly with local companies or stores to develop menstrual hygiene kits locally to reduce the cost of outsourcing and transportation costs for future reusable kits. And that's pretty much it. Any questions?